What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got our week 4 fantasy quarterback starts and sits for every single matchup. So make sure to tune in, and if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Also check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Join our free newsletter to get exclusive content along with becoming a VIP to get personalized fantasy advice throughout the season from yours truly. And then also give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin to continue interacting with us as the week progresses. But in the meantime, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdown, we want to give you guys a quick word from our sponsors at Overlay Fantasy Sports, who are taking DFS to a whole nother level. And we specifically want to highlight their all-new matchup shop, which is absolutely electric. And trust us, folks, we've been using Overlay Fantasy since the start of the NFL season, and it has been an absolute blast because let's face it, betting on the same old Team A versus Team B, spread picks can get a little bit boring. So why not spice things up a little bit? The matchup shop function at Overlay Fantasy Sports does exactly that, as it allows you to pick between individual player matchups and who you think at the end of the day will have better fantasy production. So take advantage of that. You guys are doing all this homework to begin with for your fantasy squad, so why not have it benefit your wallet as well? You can pretty much bet on any single matchup that you want. Leading up to Thursday Night Football, you can go running back versus running back in the Denver Broncos versus the New York Jets. And as long as you think that a certain player will have, let's say here, Melvin Gordon and Frank Gore within 11 points of fantasy production, then smash that buy button. But maybe you don't want to focus in on that matchup. No problem. Overlay Fantasy has other options as well. From quarterback matchups to wide receiver matchups, it is all there. The spread picks works exactly like you are used to when betting other sports, so no worries there. And if you guys want to add a couple picks to a single betting slip, then that works as well. Get that parlay going to win big. And right now, take advantage of some other sport options as well. Not only the NFL, you've got golf, MLB, and NBA. There are plenty of opportunities here to make some money. So take advantage of this incredible situation and the awesome matchup shop function within Overlay Fantasy. Our first matchup features the Denver Broncos at the New York Jets. And unfortunately, folks, if you guys are looking for startable fantasy quarterbacks, please look elsewhere, because right now we've got both these quarterbacks listed as sits. Starting with Brett Ripien, who replaces Jeff Driscoll for the Denver Broncos. Drew Lock still out. And honestly, I don't think that anybody knows a damn thing about Ripien at this point in time in terms of expectations. And how can you? The guy was an undrafted quarterback, really unproven, untested, and practically no chemistry with any of these wide receivers, any of these weapons offensively. Yes, I realize he's playing the Jets, who are pitiful, but that's not enough for me to trust him as a start. I think that the Broncos will ask him to do the bare minimum and just basically hand off the football to one of those running backs. And then Sam Darnold. I mean, maybe you can make the case that if you're truly desperate, you can start Darnold, but I just don't think that that's the case, because after these first 3 weeks, he has looked dreadful, making all the wrong reads. Maybe he gets Jamison Crowder back here, which would be a nice boost. But again, the Broncos, if there's any area that this team is somewhat average at, it might be that defense. So I don't see this game being all that great on either side of the football for the Broncos or for the Jets. So I'm staying away from both of these quarterbacks. Then Saints at Lions. This is a much better fantasy matchup. We like both of these quarterbacks in terms of starts. Drew Brees could potentially get Michael Thomas back here. If he does, though, I still don't think he will be at 100%. So I wouldn't expect Brees to all of a sudden blow up, but this should be a higher scoring affair. I like Brees and Matthew Stafford as high-end quarterback twos. Matthew Stafford last week with Kenny Golladay back did look a little bit better offensively, especially airing out the football. So he is definitely trending in the right direction as well. Next, we've got the Chargers at the Bucks. I'm starting Tom Brady here. And yes, Chris Godwin will be out probably for a week or two, but Brady still has other weapons aplenty with Mike Evans, with all those tight ends, with Miller, with Fournette, with Jones. And I think that he will be able to pick away at this Chargers defense and slowly but surely get you right around 19 to 20 fantasy points, making him a high-end quarterback too. And as far as Justin Herbert, this is not the ideal matchup. Yes, we had him as a start last week, but that was versus the Carolina Panthers. This Buccaneers defense is better, and I think they're going to force Herbert to beat them through the air. So while there might be a lot of volume, a lot of pass attempts, I don't think that they will be all that high in terms of quality. So I am fading Justin Herbert in this game. From here, we've got the Jaguars at the Bengals, and I don't mind starting either one of these quarterbacks. It won't be all that sexy. It won't be all that, high ceiling potential, but Gardner Minshew and Joe Burrow should be average quarterback 2 plays for this week. For Gardner Minshew, I don't think he's going to have as disappointing of an output as he did this last week versus the Miami Dolphins. DJ Chark expected to return. That will be a nice boost for that offense. And for Joe Burrow, the guy has been passing it a bunch, so you know that the volume will be there. This Jaguars defense isn't anything special. You've got plenty of weapons offensively for Joe Burrow with AJ Green, with Boyd, with maybe an emergence of Higgins. You've still got Mixon in there. So if there's anyone that I would prefer here, it would be Joe Burrow as, again, mid quarterback 2 with an upside maybe of high-end quarterback 2 for week 4. Moving on, we've got the Vikings at the Texans, and we're tentatively going to start both of these quarterbacks. With Kirk Cousins, yes, we finally saw the emergence of that potential wide receiver 2 on that offense for the Vikings with Justin Jefferson. Now, I wouldn't expect an outing like that every single week, but it's nice to see that there is a second option behind Adam Thielen. I do think this would be a high-scoring affair here between these two teams. So I expect Kirk Cousins to have to do, something similar to what we saw last week. So that, in my eyes, puts him in that quarterback 2 range yet again. And then as far as Deshaun Watson, this is probably his best matchup of the year. If there was ever a buy low candidate, it would be right now for Watson before he plays the Vikings. I think he shoots up to a top 10 fantasy quarterback this week. The Vikings defense does not scare anybody, and I think Watson has a nice rebound. Then Seahawks at Dolphins. This is a straightforward. Russell Wilson is a top 5 fantasy quarterback with the amount of times that the Seahawks have been airing it out. The Dolphins shouldn't scare anybody defensively. The only thing that could potentially happen here is the Seahawks get out to such a huge lead that Russell Wilson at one point in time sits in the 4th quarter. But again, if that's the case, I think there will be so many points scored beforehand that Russell Wilson's fantasy day will still be cemented as a successful one. And then as far as the Dolphins and Ryan Fitzpatrick, look, I don't love this game for the Dolphins in terms of their chances to win it, but as far as fantasy potential, Fitzpatrick will have to air it out a bunch, which means there will be a lot of opportunities. Yes, I expect some interceptions, some turnovers, but I wouldn't be shocked to see Fitzpatrick, easily get over 300 yards passing here, maybe a touchdown or 2. So for that reason, I have him as a high-end quarterback too. Moving on, we've got the Steelers at the Titans, and this game definitely has an asterisk next to it in terms of whether it will be played or not due to the concerns with COVID for the Titans. So, assuming that it gets played, let's say that we're going to start Big Ben Roethlisberger. This Titans defense, not all that scary. We just saw Kirk Cousins have a pretty successful outing versus them. I think Ben Roethlisberger can do the same with Juju Smith-Schuster, with Eric Ebron, with James Conner. We'll see if Deontay Johnson plays or not, but even if he sits, I still like Big Ben in this game. As far as sits, while we are sitting Ryan Tannehill, because this is honestly just a horrible matchup. The Steelers defense is a great one, and we don't think that game managing ability for Ryan Tannehill will be able to get him through this match. So for that reason, if it comes to him having to air out the football, we don't like his chances versus this great Steelers defense. We are fading him in week 4. Afterwards, we've got the Browns at the Cowboys. We're starting Dak Prescott. The guy has all the weapons in the world offensively. Yes, maybe this defense can be a little bit better than what we saw in the Seattle Seahawks in week 3. But either way, I think the Cowboys will eventually pull away in this game. And Dak Prescott should have easily a top 10 fantasy quarterback outing, potentially a top 5 outing, I would say, is the ceiling. And as far as Baker Mayfield, we are sitting him right now, just don't have enough confidence in this offense, specifically with Mayfield and him finding those wide receivers. It is the Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt show. This is a run-first team. And if the Browns go down, yes, Mayfield will have to air it out. But right now, he's just making too many mistakes, and that makes him a little bit of a too risky play for week 4. Then Cardinals at Panthers, we're starting both of these quarterbacks. Kyler Murray obviously has the much higher upside, top 5 upside, in fact, this week. I expect a huge bounce back performance in week 4 in terms of what we saw with Murray versus the Detroit Lions. This Panthers defense is absolutely atrocious. Kyler Murray will take advantage not only through the air, but also on the ground with his legs. And then Teddy Bridgewater, obviously he's not in the same, even conversation as Kyler Murray, but versus this Cardinals defense, I think he can have some success. I see him as a quarterback 2 on the week. And for that reason, I think he will have around 250 passing yards, maybe 2 touchdowns, something like that. So from that perspective, you could do worse at the quarterback position. Afterwards, we got the Colts at the Bears, and we've officially got a new starter for the Chicago Bears at quarterback, and we'll honestly go ahead and take a chance on him in week 4 with Nick Foles versus the Colts. The Bears offense looks a little bit better with him. Now, I wouldn't get my hopes up. I don't think he's going to have as an efficient day as he did versus the Atlanta Falcons now in week 4 versus the Colts. I don't anticipate him to throw 3 touchdowns, in limited number of attempts again. But I again see him in a similar type of matchup, maybe to a Teddy Bridgewater. I like Allen Robinson. I like someone like an Anthony Miller as that complementary piece. We'll see if Nick Foles can go and sustain both of these weapons at the same time. But all in all, you could do worse in terms of matchups. Nick Foles has a decent one versus the Colts, but guess what? Phillip Rivers here versus the Bears, I am absolutely fading him. I'm not saying that the Colts can't win this game, but this reminds me of Kirk Cousins versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. This Bears defense is a good unit, and this is a bad matchup for a game-managing quarterback, which Phillip Rivers maybe is trending more so towards at this point in time. Factor into this Campbell out, Michael Pittman out. So it's going to be T.Y. Hilton and then who else at wide receiver. So we're fading Phillip Rivers. Then Ravens at Washington. I expect Lamar Jackson to have a big bounce back effort in week 4. He was not good in week 3 versus the Kansas City Chiefs. No way around that. But I think we'll see a bounce back effort here. I think pretty much from the entire Ravens squad. Washington, even though they have a good defense, I don't think they'll be able to hang in this one for long enough. At some point or another, the Ravens will break through and Lamar Jackson will get his. So he is a easily, in my opinion, borderline top 5 fantasy quarterback option. And then Dwayne Haskins, he is a sit pretty much every single week. This Ravens defense is a good one. And if your own coaches are telling you that you're the guy that's holding back your own team, which is what Ron Rivera said about Dwayne Haskins, you're not going to get that many endorsements from us. Dwayne Haskins just right now is not a good quarterback, and forget about him being a fantasy option. Then Giants at Rams. We'll start Jared Goff here. The Giants defense isn't all that scary. And Jared Goff had a pretty successful outing versus the Buffalo Bills in that comeback effort that ultimately came up a little bit short. But again, he should have some success versus the Giants. But we are sitting Daniel Jones. Honestly, I expected a much better performance from Daniel Jones last week versus the 49ers, who were extremely banged up, but very disappointing. Now, will he bounce back? Probably, but to what extent is the question. This Rams defense also not a bad group on the defensive line. And then in the secondary, they've got some pieces. Daniel Jones in that offense is hurting. To me, he becomes a viable option in fantasy once they figure out the running back situation. And I think that will still take some time. So for that reason, we are sitting Daniel Jones. Then Patriots at Chiefs. This is probably the easiest start you're going to have. Start both Cam Newton and Patrick Mahomes. Both these guys will be top 5 fantasy quarterback options on the week. I think Cam Newton will rebound. He will need to air it out here versus the Chiefs, so there should be points aplenty. And for that reason, I like him in a bounce back effort, as a quarterback one. Patrick Mahomes, same deal. We saw what this guy is capable of versus the Baltimore Ravens. He absolutely murdered them. I think he can do the same versus the New England Patriots. Way too many offensive weapons for Patrick Mahomes. He is an absolute juggernaut, and I think that will continue versus the New England Patriots. Then Bills at Raiders. We're starting Josh Allen, who is in an absolute tear. We said last week that would be his true test up until this point in the season, and he passed it with flying colors versus the LA Rams, at least in terms of fantasy output. So I think he can definitely do the same versus the Raiders. I like Josh Allen as a top 10 fantasy quarterback this week. However, Derek Carr, we are sitting Derek Carr because at this point in time, the guy is absolutely hurting at the wide receiver position. You've got Ruggs, you've got pretty much every single other option as well. And honestly, it's just going to be the Darren Waller show. And if he gets shut down, then Derek Carr could be in store for a very long day. So for that reason, we are fading Derek Carr here. Then Eagles at the 49ers, tentatively starting both these quarterbacks. Carson Wentz, I don't think he will struggle as much as Daniel Jones did versus the 49ers. I think you're going to get a middle-of-the-pack quarterback 2 performance from Carson Wentz. And in a week where there might be some canceled games, I would take a shot on Carson Wentz. Then Jimmy Garoppolo, tentatively have him as a start. That is obviously if he plays this game. If he doesn't, then I would put Nick Mullins, who would be the starter, as a sit. Not enough confidence in him. This isn't as easy of a matchup as it was versus the New York Giants, so keep an eye out on this situation as we progress. Then finally, Falcons at Packers. Again, pretty easy. You're starting both Matt Ryan and Aaron Rodgers. I would say that Matt Ryan probably has a little bit of a higher ceiling because I expect the Falcons to be down in this game. So that means they will have to throw it a bunch more than compared to the Packers, who will probably rely both on a combination of the rush and the pass. So I like Matt Ryan a little bit more. I think both these guys probably finish right outside the top 10. Maybe one of them sneaks in the top 10 fantasy quarterbacks for week 4. So with that, we wrap up this week 4 quarterback start and sit breakdown. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Along with any other start or sit questions you guys might have, we will do our best to answer them. And as a quick reminder, if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. It means a lot. Also, check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Join our free newsletter for access to some exclusive content and become a VIP to get personalized season-long fantasy advice from yours truly, along with giving us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin to continue interacting with us as the week progresses. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.